And the question is, why aren't diesel outboards more popular? Seems like you don't see a lot of them out on the water. Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. This is an excellent question. I can't wait to get into this. Do want to thank our show sponsor, though, for bringing you this content, PartsView.com. They are a parts and outboard superstore. You can get everything that you need for your boat and for your outboard, and look up parts that you need for your outboard using their diagrams and schematics at PartsView.com. You can get a discount of up to $50 using the links and the coupon codes in the description below. Now, as far as the outboards are concerned, really, I think what it comes down to, first of all, I love it. I love the fact that you've got diesel outboards a lot more prevalent nowadays. I mean, they did have them back quite a few years ago, honestly. Realistically, they weren't as recreational. The government, Mercury, was able to take the Optimax and make that a diesel outboard well over a decade ago, and the government was mainly what used that. That is because on a lot of their larger ships, they carried diesel fuel, and they didn't want to have to carry diesel fuel plus gasoline, so they made the Optimax run on diesel. So they have been around for a while, but as far as recreationally, really you didn't get into Ox and Cox, and I think Yanmar even has one, where you have these diesel outboards in the recreational field. Now, why they aren't as popular, to me personally, I think it comes down to the speed. Everybody on the water wants to go fast. They want to go faster. They want to get where they're going a lot quicker. And so a diesel, though it is way more proficient in moving weight, that's why you see diesel inboards on sport fish and larger yachts, because you need that power that you get from a diesel to move weight. But they don't spin the RPM. A diesel engine goes not near the amount. I mean, you're not spinning a diesel outboard at 7,000 RPM. Most recreational gasoline outboards are running up to about 6,000 RPM is the wide open throttle. Some of them are 6,400, and then some will get up to the 7,000 range. But recreationally, 6,000 is probably your consistent wide open throttle number across most gasoline outboards. With that being said, a diesel outboard, they only run up to a few thousand RPM. They don't get to 6, 5, 6, 7,000 RPM. And it's that lack of speed and other reasons that you don't get the speed. You're not going to see a diesel boat going 60, 70 miles an hour. I think a lot of them are getting into the 30, 40 mile an hour range, but they're not really getting into the 55, 65, 75 mile an hour range. And so with that lack of speed, I'm pretty sure that's the main reason why they're not as popular. Not to mention the weight factor. So let's see here. Your 300, just the Ox diesel outboard, the 300 weighs 950 pounds. So it is way heavier, and it only spins up to 4,400 RPM at wide open throttle. So lack of speed and the weight factor, that's just what it is. I think those are the two biggest reasons why they never really took off, because everybody wants to go fast, and gasoline is way more accessible than diesel is, at least on the water. But other than that, I don't see a reason other than that why they wouldn't, because I mean, you can get way more hours out of a diesel. You can move way more weight, but outside of those two benefits, I don't think there's too much more outside of that other than personal preference. Anywhere offshore, you can get diesel in pretty much every island, all along the coast. Wherever you can find yachts or bigger boats, you're going to find diesel. Diesel's probably also a lot more easily accessible all across the world, not, outside of the U.S. So I can't really think of another reason why they aren't more popular, because, I think they're outstanding. If you're the kind of person in the boat, as long as the boat can handle the weight of the outboard, if you're the kind of person that doesn't care about speed, then longevity and power and the fuel economy that you're going to get out of the diesel, it's very comparable, if not better. Now, Bill Wallenstein wants to know, love your work as always. Thank you, Bill. I think I would have pulled the leaning post when we started. My knees don't move that well anymore. Talking about that Key West 17-foot boat pulling the leaning post. Now, normally on pretty much every boat that we do that kind of that big of a restoration project, we will pull the leaning post or the seat or whatever is in the way to get in the console. But unfortunately, Key West, especially that model, in their infinite wisdom, through bolted those leaning posts into place. You can't take them out. You have to drill those things out unless someone knows of a better way that I have not figured out yet on how to get those leaning posts, or like, it's not really a leaning post even. It's like a bracket that a cooler seat sits in. They're through bolted. So unless you know of a better way to get that out, because if you try and take them out, it's been my experience, all the ones that I've done in the past, if you try and take those out, you're just going to spin the bolts. So I don't even touch them because you don't want that thing to get loose, because as soon as you unscrew the bolts, you can't tighten them back up. So yeah, that's normally you would want to. I don't know why they did that. Like, why would they have ever done that way? I do not know. Because over time, as those things get loose and things wear and you need to mess around with stuff, yeah, it's not serviceable. I'll put it that way. It's not a serviceable item. So unfortunately, that's the reality of it. Toolman Taylor also says, would stern lift creating bow plowing make my boat lean or list when I am turning the boat? Yes, it can. So we're talking about anything. If you got a hook in the hull, if you got trim tabs, if you've got a stern lifting prop, any of that stuff that lifts the stern does push the bow down. And when you push the bow of the boat down, you are going to have the V of the boat pushes down like this, and that's going to bow plow, which is going to steer, in one direction or another. Now, as far as a list is concerned, listing is more of a weight issue. I mean, that's what I would consider. Whenever someone says listing, I'm thinking of weight. I'm thinking that the boat is listing, which means it's like heeling to one side or the other because it has a disproportionate amount of weight on one side of the boat or the other, which makes it list. So any boat, when you turn it, is going to lean. Like it's going to heel over whenever you make a turn, because it's just the physics of the boat. A boat's hull is like this. So whenever you go to turn, it tilts like this. And when it tilts like that, that bow does dig and it does turn. And so it kind of rolls over and starts riding on this, bottom portion of the hull. So as you go, no matter which direction you go, it's going to list. But if you've got a boat that is either pulling or pushing to one side or the other, that could be, if you got too much horsepower on a smaller boat, the torque of the prop will lean the boat. So that is a factor. But other than that, as far as a list is concerned, when you turn, it depends on how bad that list is. I mean, we've talked about the Centuries, that 32 Century that from like late 90s, early 2000s, something like that, that 32, that thing would randomly just heel over and ride on the bottom. So, the bottom of the boat's a V, right? And that V comes up, and then you got your gunnels. So that boat would actually heel over to the point where the V, it would ride on this bottom part almost like a flat bottom boat. So you would have the boat like this going straight, and it would flip over and be riding on this section like a flat bottom boat with your gunnel right here. I mean, I swear you could probably roll one of those things if you really wanted to. So if that's what you're talking about, if you're talking about a boat that like flips over like that, and is doing that, there are certain hulls that will do that. Why they do that, I do not know. It's just the design of the hull. But the bow plowing, that could potentially promote that, but I don't think that would be your main cause of that. I don't think stern lift would mainly cause that. There are just some hulls that it's the design of the hull and the way the way it's made, how high the floor is, the deck is off the bottom, where's your static water line, where's it riding on in the hull, how are the strakes designed, what's the distance that the strakes go forward, what's the weight from the bow to the stern, like all those different things that go into the design of a boat. There are some that, for whatever reason, that design went too far, being that 32 Century from 20 years ago or whatever it was, that they would ride horribly. There are other brands that have other problems. Like, you know, I've been in boats, not going to say the brands because it's been a recent boat, just because I don't want to bash that brand, because they make other models, but there's one model that they make, and if you do not have the boat full of fuel and weighted down, it rides terribly. Like, if it's low on fuel and you don't have a lot of people in the boat, that boat will chine walk and it will just get squirrely. You have no control with the helm, and it's just dangerous. Once you put a full tank of fuel in it and you put a bunch of people in there, it sinks the boat down in the water, and then it rides great. But yeah, there's different things to different hulls, different models that do stuff. So I'd be interested to see what model boat you have that's doing this. That's kind of my idea when I'm thinking about a list and, you know, with the bow plowing issue. Superman says, is it possible to do a DTS calibration on a Verado, screw it up, and have the engine go in reverse when it is put in forward gear and forward when it is put in reverse? What if it was actually put in reverse by mistake, shifter not mounted, an engine on a stand getting ready for an install, and the computer learned that reverse is forward? Just curious, as I think this might be what I am experiencing. It's a long story. Superman, great topic. So theoretically, I guess you could. I've never physically tried to do that, so I can't say whether you can or not. First of all, when you say that, it makes me think of a left-handed versus right-handed thing. Like, you've got the wrong lower unit on the boat and it's calibrated. Like, if you calibrate a starboard engine, because it's a Verado, everything's digital. So it's a digital throttle and shift. So everything's digital. It's only the computers that do it. And the lower units are what changes. So the lower unit, whether it's a port lower unit or a starboard lower unit, is going to determine which is forward, which is reverse, and which direction the shift actuator goes into whenever you calibrate it. I guess theoretically it is possible that if you got a right-handed gear case or right-handed engine and you put it in reverse whenever you hit reverse and you put it in forward whenever you hit forward, that it would take that and boom, it would mess that up. So I guess, yeah, theoretically it's possible. I've never tried it, so I can't confirm whether or not it would or not. But generally I'm thinking that the props got swapped or something like that. But like you said, you just bought this engine, I guess, and it's sitting on a stand. So yeah, if you tried to calibrate it on a stand and you had the control box flipped and you hit yes on the forward and yes on the reverse, there is also an inversion. You can invert it as well. So there is a button that you can click to invert it in the calibration. So yeah, I think it's totally possible that the calibration can get switched up and you can definitely recalibrate it. The only thing that I would definitely make sure is not the problem is that the lower unit is correct. That's the one thing that I would double check on. It's super easy on a Verado or any Mercury. If you just look at it, it's very hard to see it, but on the prop shaft, on the very end of the prop shaft, it will have a L stamped on it if it's a left-handed lower unit. So if it goes on a port lower unit left hand, it'll have an L stamped on the back of the prop shaft. So right where the prop nut is, right there on the tip of that prop shaft, look for an L. Usually there's two stamped on there, and that'll tell you if it's a left hand. If somebody put a left-hand lower unit on your right-handed engine and now you put a right-handed prop on there and you calibrate that as a starboard engine and now it's turning, you know, as a right hand, you're basically running that lower unit in reverse all the time. So that's the only thing I would make sure that didn't happen, because if it did and you go run that engine, I've seen them run for a lot of hours, but I've seen other ones fail. So, you know, we've done that whole game of taking a right-handed lower unit, flipping the shift crank, and making it a left-handed lower unit. seen them get hundreds of hours, and then we've done it and seen it get very few. So yeah, I would make sure that you do have a right-handed lower unit on there, because like I said, basically you're going to be running the lower unit in reverse with a right-handed prop in a right-hand calibration. So you don't want that, because the gears and the bearings and everything, I mean, technically, theoretically, it's the same, but they're not really the same. You know what I'm saying? It's a right-handed gear case is meant to have this gear being forward, because in reverse, you're pulling back. So you're pulling back force, and you're not pushing force forward. You're also not going 6,200 RPM in reverse. Whereas forward, you're pushing forward, and you are also running 6,400 RPM wide open throttle. So if your reverse gear is taking all that, it's potentially a problem. Ryan Ruiz says, well, not sure if this has been asked. I have a 2003 Mercury 200 EFI. Is there a way to connect to Garmin for gauge data? I can't get accurate RPM for my gauges, even after sending them to Faria to be rebuilt. So if you have rebuilt gauges, I don't think your gauges are the problem. Most likely it is a problem with the signal wires coming from the engine. That is going to be most likely your problem, not really a gauge issue. But as far as the conversion goes from being able to take that engine, now that one, so on a 2003 Optimax, for sure, it's got SmartCraft capability. You can put a gateway in there, you can convert it. On a 2003 200 EFI, I do not think that is a SmartCraft capable outboard. I'm not 100%. I don't think it is. Could be, but I don't think it is. Since it's not SmartCraft capable, meaning that it's not got SmartCraft on it, it doesn't have that digital signal. So you would need to convert your analog signals to digital. They do make those converters. So some of them are pretty pricey. I am trying to think of the different brands. One was like DS11 or something. Then there's like, I think Fox Marine makes one. Noland or Roland, something like that. Noland or Roland, a DS11, something like that. There is a converter. It's like $300-400. I would go with that and get that, because there are cheaper ones that you can get from China, but from what I've seen, most of them don't read correctly. So basically what you're doing is you are taking the sensing wires that are coming from your engine, whether that be temperature, RPM, your voltage, all that stuff, that is being put into this little box, and then that box is converting it to a NEMA 2000 signal. Then you would just tie your NEMA 2000. You're going to need to have a NEMA backbone in the boat, but it'll put it on the NEMA 2000 network, which your Garmin will be able to pull that information off of the network. You'd need that converter in order to do that. Everything else, basically anything since like 2006, for the most part, 2006, 2008, somewhere in there, Yamaha, Suzuki, Honda, pretty much all their stuff is, there's either a gateway or a vessel view link or a converter that will, it will do that. It will automatically have it to where you can convert that. Each brand has their own component that does convert it from analog to digital, but they can all be put on an MFD or a multifunction display. So basically your GPS, whatever it is, whatever screen you got, pretty much anything after 2006, 2008, somewhere around there, they all have that capability to do that with. Ron Frederick, those companies use their customers as their quality control mechanism. Talking about big brands and the way they use the general public to do that. They do put in a lot of R&D. A lot of companies do. I think one of the issues that the boating world has that other industries don't have is that the boating industry is a lot smaller than you would think it is. It really is not near the car industry or anything else. Obviously, think about that. There's millions and millions and millions of more cars on the road than there are boats. If Ford makes a model, they're making 300,000 models of this one vehicle, whereas a boat builders might make 100 models. Not models, but 100, boats. They might make 100 boats of one model in a year. So over the lifespan of a model of a boat, you might end up with maybe 10,000 boats. Whereas GM, Ford, they might have 1 million of a model out on the road. So there's way more, information there, or I guess testing, like you're saying, where a boat doesn't have that. They don't have that extensive amount of testing done. And for the most part, pretty much South Florida is the hub. If any boat brand, if you are not testing your boats, any engine manufacturer, any of those companies, if you're not testing your engines in South Florida, then I don't know what you're doing. Because if you're trying to test your engine in the middle of Minnesota or Wisconsin, I mean, everybody knows who's in Wisconsin, but if you're testing your engines in Wisconsin, that's not going to work. They don't obviously test their engines in Wisconsin. I'm just using that as an example. But South Florida is where it's at. Like the water, the salt, the minerals in the water, the heat, the amount of hours that get put on in a year, the way it gets used, the sun, like this is where, if you can make it down here, then you can make it anywhere. Like if you take a boat or an engine that will last 15 years in the Florida Keys, that engine is going to last for 200 years in Minnesota. So it's really kind of hard to say that they're using their customers as their quality control mechanism, but you have some truth in that statement, because there's just not, they don't produce that many. Eric Davey says, that's what happened to my G2s. They would run as long as you kept feeding them $100 bills every trip. It was always a different component. Finally bought brand new Yamaha 300s. That's been the experience for a lot of Evinrude people, which there's so many people that are so mad about Evinrude, which the way they did, that's the other comment that I've got on here somewhere. I thought I had it on here, but I had a comment about Evinrude and what they did to their customers was like how did it go? What did they get? He said something about what Evinrude did to their customers is the definition of unreliable, which is pretty bad. The way they left everybody was bad. And yeah, there's a lot of people that had that experience where their G2s, like you said, every time you take it out, you just got to feed them $100 bills like it's a slot machine in order to keep that thing running. And then you move over to a Yamaha 300 and you probably have no issues. Every time you turn the key, boom, they start. Like it's the definition of reliability. So with you there. And that 4.2, those 300 Yamahas are outstanding engines. So I'm with you 100% there, Eric. RoboKiss says, I have a 150 Vivor on a 225 Tohatsu Honda. The rack has 300 horsepower rated sticker. The helm has 150 horsepower sticker. I will use the boat every second week, overnight, average 4 hours of running time. I've had this steering for a year now, and so far so good for $350. That is something I do want to do some Vivor testing, because, it is. The price point, for a C-Star system, you could be anywhere from $1,200 to $2,000 to $2,500 in a system, whereas for $360, you got a full hydraulic steering system. Come on, like that's crazy numbers. So I would like to get my hands on some Vivor products and do some true academical testing on them, but you would think that, how do you mess that up? It's a hydraulic system. You're pushing fluid one direction or the other. It's very mechanical and very simple. You turn the steering wheel this way, fluid flows like this. When you turn the steering wheel the other way, fluid flows the other direction, and that just moves the cylinder back and forth. So it's a very, very simple system. So I think that they would be very reliable. That's my assumption. And like you're saying, RoboKiss, you've had a great experience. Enduro22 says, if your outboard is so complex that only a specialized tech can work on it, then it is a bad outboard. Well, there's some truth in that too, but honestly, over the past 15 to 20 years, once you get above 150 horsepower, it kind of has to get complex. You can't make a simple 600 horsepower engine. Like, it's just not possible. And not to mention anything that's supercharged or digital. If you want all the digital electronics on the boat, like, you want to be able to turn on your gauge and see all the engine data. You want to see oil pressure, oil temp, block pressure, your timing. You want to see the RPM. You want to see your fuel consumption. You want to see your fuel pressure. You want to see all these different things, the TPS, the supercharger temp. Like, you want to see all this different stuff. There's no way to make that simple. You've got to put a ton of sensors on there for that to work. And then you want to have autopilot and skyhook and the boat sitting in place and auto docking and all these other features. You really can't make it. You really can't make it, without the specialized, stuff. It kind of gets that way. So I think once you get above 150 horsepower, that's when they start getting complex. Whenever you get to a supercharged engine or you get to a V8 or something like that, it's kind of with what it comes with the higher horsepower. A 25 or a 9.9 or a 40 horsepower engine, a 1, 2, 3 cylinder engine is going to be very simple no matter what, even if it is a 4-stroke. A 4-stroke 40, you're only going to have 3 or 4 sensors on there, and it's going to be very simple. You're going to have something to create voltage, being a stator and a flywheel. Then you're going to have a computer that triggers your spark with your ignition coils and a fuel system. So pressurized fuel. Most of them are going to be 4-strokes, so you're going to have a simple vapor separator tank, a fuel rail with fuel injectors. Very, very simple. So that's kind of my take on it. You're not going to have a big engine that's simple. Johnny Dime says, great content as usual. How much would I have to pay to get a marine surveyor for a 25-foot boat in the Northeast? Thanks. Johnny Dime, I got no idea what it's going to cost in the Northeast. I can't help you on that one. I can give you a reference in South Florida. In South Florida, I would say that a 25-foot boat is going to cost you somewhere around, it could be range. So you could probably find somebody for $500. You could probably find someone for $1,000, depending on how extensive you want your survey to be and what all you want to be surveyed on the boat. I would say you're going to be somewhere in that range down here, probably by the foot. I bet most surveyors are going to be by the foot. They're going to say, is it in the water or is it out of the water? Because if it's in the water, you're going to have less tests. You're not going to be able to do, certain tests on the hull. And then out of the water, you're going to either have to pay for a haul and block at a marina. You're going to have to, pay to get it trailered out. Or if the boat's on a trailer, out of the water, it's going to be a lot simpler. And you're going to be able to do more tests based on having access to the hull. So depending on how extensive of a survey you want to get done, then I would say anywhere from probably $700 to $1,000 for a 25-foot boat. My guess is it goes by the foot, and you're going to find a variable there based on what you want to have surveyed. Joey Bag of Donuts says, the Evinrude E-Tech infomercials always cracked me up. That is another one. I forgot about this comment, but yeah, that was something that, honestly, I don't really say it very often, but I could tell when Evinrude was going under. I think a lot of people did. I think a lot of people saw the Evinrude going away a year or two before they went away. For me, as soon as they came out, like you're saying, the infomercials, whenever you come out saying that you have a 10-year warranty and you don't have to service the engine for 5 years or 500 hours or whatever it was, I mean, like, come on. You're not going to service an engine for 5 years and you're going to put that under a warranty? Like, please. Like, that's anybody that's buying that is somebody that's never owned an engine. Like, you've never owned an outboard, or you have only owned an outboard where you put 10 to 15 hours on it a year. But anybody in South Florida, I mean, 5 years and no service? Like, there's no way. There is no way. Don't change your gear lube. Anybody out there, don't change your gear lube for 500 hours and let's see, 80% of them gear cases are probably going to blow up. There's just no way you can go that long without having a massive problem. So to me, I thought that was, that cracked me up too. Like, I mean, 10 years and no service for 5 years. That's just, you're crazy. I mean, most of them do 100 hours and some of them want 50 hours depending on the use. I mean, the most now, they got some of these bigger ones that you can get 200 hours before you change it, but 500 or 5 years, like that is just crazy to me. It's just, I never heard of it. Fake name says, thoughts on Stable 360 Marine, running 93 octane, no ethanol, treated with Stable 360 Marine in my 2-stroke auto lube oil injection system with Yamalube only. I mean, I don't really have a lot of thoughts on 360 Marine. If you're running 93 octane, no ethanol, like that's a high octane fuel. So I don't know. You trying to get a lot out of that thing. I mean, and I'm pretty sure you got a 25 horse. So, I'm pretty sure you're trying to get running 93s high. You know what? One company that I do like as far as like lubricants and additives and stuff, I do like RevX. So RevX does have a lot of good stuff out there, and I like a lot of their lubes. Whenever it comes to the Yamalube and the Pennzoil and the Amsoil and all that 2-stroke stuff, I honestly don't know anymore, because a lot of the lubes now, 2-stroke oil, in my world, I just don't deal with that stuff anymore. I mean, it just isn't really a thing. So I know a lot of people that like a lot of other oils outside of the Yamalube. I've always kind of been lenient more towards the brand name, but as far as the Stable 360 Marine, don't know a lot about it. I know 93 octanes a lot, so the no ethanol, that's good. I don't know why you'd really want a Stable in there unless you're letting it sit, but really you probably don't need it to sit that long. RJ says, thank you for your channel. I've also been watching the Boarding and Boating channel a long time and really enjoy your advice. Thank you, RJ. Looks like you got quite the question here. So I was wondering if you could help me figure out a problem with my friend's boat. He has twin 218 Evinrude E-Tech 200 HOs. One has about 800 hours on it, and the other had a new power head from Evinrude that only has maybe 100 hours on it. Both motors seem to be very inconsistent on temperature. We have replaced thermostats, pop-up valves, and water pumps over the years, and they never seem to be consistent with the temperature. Whether they are at idle, slow trolling speed, or high speed, one is always higher than the other. Sometimes they get into the 170s and close to 180, which makes me nervous. I would be extremely nervous about that. 180 degrees is way too hot for an outboard. Like, that's too hot. I run twin Yamaha F300s, which are so consistent within a degree or two of each other. The Evinrudes just seem very odd to me. Well, those 42300s are outstanding engines. So, yeah, you got the pinnacle of reliability there. Do you know of any other issues that we should be trying to diagnose? I feel like he is always spending money on thermostats, water pumps, and pop valves to no avail. They never really look bad. Yeah, I would say one of those engines has a hot spot. That's my opinion. I would think that you've got a clump of grass or sand or shells or whatever. You got something is clogged somewhere in one of the cooling passages of that engine, my guess, or you've got something going on. I mean, to have 180 degrees, that's hot. That's getting hot. So either you're losing water flow or you have a spot in the engine that's got a clog somewhere that is stopping the cooling water from doing its job. It should not be getting 180 or, I mean, you get that's just too hot. Most of them are going to run around 140, 150, 160, but you get up to 170, 180, that's the time that's like, that's when your temperature alarms come on for a lot of engines. So I would say you got a hot spot or something going on with the water flow to the engine, whether that be the water tube or whatever. You could try a rid lime and hook it up to rid lime and flush that engine out, see if you can clean something out, see what kind of debris comes out. But my guess is you got a hot spot. You could also take a temp gun. So if you take the cowling off and you got the engine running there, I'd put it in the water or in a tank. That way it can have efficient back pressure and water flow and water volume. But then you could take a temp gun and run around the engine with a temp gun and see where it's getting hot. most likely you're going to find a hot spot somewhere on the engine, which, depending on what it is, I mean, one of them's got a new power head on it. So which one is getting hot? Is it the one that's got the new power head? Because if it's the one that's got a new power head, I could probably tell you that the old power head got too hot and blew up. If it's the one that's got the 800 hours on it, then that one's probably going to be something completely different. That could be a hot spot or something clogging it. But that's kind of where I would start. I'd take the temp gun and then see if it's got a hot spot and then try and do a flush on it. Probably also looking at that 800 hours versus the 100 hours, because if the one that's getting hot and inconsistent, if that's the one that just got a new power head, then he better start saving his money, because he's going to have another power head here in the near future. Because if he got 800 out of one, that means he got probably 700 or so out of the other one, and then it blew up. Now, if it was getting hot before it blew up, then he's got 100 hours on there. He's already, I don't know, 30% on the way to a new power head if you don't figure that out. If it's the new power head that's getting hot, you definitely better figure that one, think about it. I mean, it's a potential problem, obviously. One Chosen 24/7 says, I am looking at purchasing a 2014 Yamaha F-150 4-stroke that has 3,000 hours on it. They are asking $7,000. If you know that they use it regularly, should I be concerned, or should I be more concerned with something that has been sitting with little or no hours for years? If compression and everything else looks good, what do you think about the price? I think that price is high. Honestly, I think $7,000, 7 G's for 3,000 hours and a 10-year-old engine, that's a little high. The hours don't concern me. I'm not really worried about 3,000 hours, because I've seen them get 7,000 hours or 8,000. I mean, if it's used regularly, that F-150 will run forever. It's a very coveted engine. Once people have them, they hold on to them until they're dead. I heard someone else say, what was it, last week? They said, Yamis don't die, they're murdered maintenance. So that's definitely could be potential right there. But no, I think $7,000 is a little high. I looked one up whenever I saw this comment, and I saw a cosmetic damage F-150 brand new from Boaters World for $10,500. So for $3,500 more, you can have a brand new whatever it was, maybe a 2023, but have a brand new outboard with full warranty for only $3,500 more. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't even be looking at that other one. I know some of the other ones, a lot of them will go for 7 or 8, but a lot of them that go for 7 or 8, you're talking 2019, 2020 with 400 hours on them. So, $7,000 seems like a lot for 3,000 hours on a 10-year-old engine. That's my thought. And the last question we'll do from Maliko de Souza. I don't know if I made your name right or not, but what does the button do? Last week we did a video on a shifting issue, and that button that is right there at your shift mechanism, this is pretty much going to be consistent for all outboards. They all have what is called a shift position switch. And whether that's built into a shift actuator or whatever in a newer engine, by and large, most outboards have a shift position switch, which tells the engine computer where the gear case is, if it's in neutral or not. Most of them are just an on-off switch. So when you go to neutral, it depresses the switch, which lets the engine know that the lower unit is in neutral. So it works it almost works in conjunction with your neutral safety switch, which tells you which position your handle is. It's pretty much the control system of the engine and the safety function of the engine, where the outboard has two things that control what position the gear case is, what position the prop is, which is a very, very important deal. You don't want to be able to start your engine with it in gear. So if your handle is in gear, then it needs to know. And if your lower unit is in gear, it needs to know. So your neutral safety switch lets the engine know if your handle is in neutral, and the shift position switch lets the engine know if your lower unit is in gear or in neutral. But the two together kind of work together. That's basically all that is the shift position switch, or an SPS. And that's all that button does, is lets it know where the gear case is.